Hello, everybody. This is Susan Clinton, and this is Tough to Treat. Thanks for listening in today. It's July 4th, and it's our nation's birthday for us in the States. If you're listening from around the world, we welcome you on our nation's birthday. Today, we're going to be talking about a patient that felt like she really couldn't make any more significant changes in her system for function, but using the power of breath could really open things up and make things a lot different. I hope you enjoy, and please leave us any kind of review that you would like to leave us and any feedback on any of our programs. Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is Susan Clinton, and I'm here with Erica Meloe, and we are Tough to Treat. Happy 4th of July, Erica.
Happy 4th of July, Susan. Oh my gosh. Yeah, red, white, and blue. Happy.
Yep, summertime is here, and it is, I don't know how it is in the rest of the country, but it has been really hot in the northeastern section for sure. We definitely are having a very warm, very hot summer, which is okay with me, but it does get a little draining after a while in this part of the world.
I know. We went from rain, and cold to 90 degrees today.
Yeah, blistering hot.
Yeah.
Which is good. So anyway, it feels a little bit like the Southeast to me.
I know, right? Oh my God. Oh no.
Okay, let's get started right to it. Today I'm going to be talking about a lady that I had in the clinic a while back. She is a female in her early 70s, and she came in actually kind of on a discovery visit first and then transitioned into seeing me for a couple of visits. Kind of a long, interesting history. Her main complaints as she came in was, I have neck problems and I have problems with my right SI joint. And that was her beginning thing. And then she believes that arthritis was the cause of her problems.
Okay.
But she kind of started to go through a pretty lengthy history here that some is important, but maybe not all. I think the story is what's really important here, and really sitting down and listening to her story. She has never really had anybody do that with her before. She's seen many people, many physicians. She's had many procedures and interventions done. But she walks away with the same thing, that I can't do this because of arthritis. I can't do this because I had this. I can't do this because if that begins to bother it, then I know I'm harming it. So that was her belief system as she started in with me. And, so I said, I'm curious about that. Tell me a little bit more. And let me just hear she goes, well, where do you want me to start? And I said, anywhere where you feel is appropriate. It's your story. You tell it. And I just kind of sat back and let her talk. And she kind of bounced around a little bit, and then it took her a few minutes, and then I think she kept waiting for me to interrupt her. But she finally kind of got into the story, and basically the story was that she ended up having, she fell, I don't know, about close to maybe 15, 18 years ago, and had a broken patella. And she said that really bothered her and really changed a lot of things for her, because she wasn't able to dance at that point. She was continuing in ballet and continues to this day in ballet. She loves it. It's just where she wants to move and how she wants to move. And she participates in that and walks with her friends. Anyway, that took her offline for a while. And she felt like that her knee never really came back. It was on the right side. It was stiff. She told a story of how the knee stiffness began to alter her back, and she feels like that was the beginning cascade of events for her back and her hip, and that none of it was ever the same since then. Somewhere in between all of this, she developed what she called a gluteal tendinosis, and we've talked about that before on the podcast. She said her SI goes out, and that she also was treated a lot for a trochanteric bursitis on the right side.
Okay.
So to this day, she says, I still have trouble with my SI being out, and the gluteal tendinosis and the trochanteric bursa.
Okay.
So In between there, she had a sling operation for urinary incontinence, of which she said, helped the leaking quite a bit. I asked her about urgency, and she said that it depends. Depends on it just depends. She can't really find a rhythm to it. Sometimes she has urinary urgency, sometimes she doesn't. She also had a partial mastectomy for breast cancer and some follow-up radiation treatments about 3 or 4 years ago. So we have that. And then she said that one of the things that kind of plagues her intermittently is a bit of colitis, and it seems to come up and down with if she's, her worry about stuff. If she gets super worried or isn't feeling well, sometimes the colitis will kick in. So then she also started talking about her neck.
Oh boy, she's all over the place.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's okay. It was just like, keep going. Let's just hear the rest of it.
Exactly.
And she talked about, how she feels that her right side of her neck gives her pain and headaches. That is kind of like a ram's horn coming around the eye. And that she feels like if she turns to the right a lot, it's kind of hard for her to turn her whole head back. So she kind of demonstrated, turning and not feeling, and feeling like she had to turn her whole body to do it. And when that happened, she would talk about, some symptoms into her shoulder and maybe down into her upper back area just a little bit as well. So, and so basically so I said, so tell me how this story has progressed then. Tell me about what you're doing now and what you couldn't do then and what's changed and all of the different things that are going on. And she said, well, I wasn't even really going to come in because it just seems so minor compared to what other people have. And I said, well, your story is real to you. So we're not going to compare it and judge it to other people. Let's, just talk about what's going on with you and what you would like to see changed. And so basically she said that, through the years, she has been able to restore her walking with her friends. So she walks 5 miles 4 or 5 times a week with her friends. And that's a nice, good, brisk walk that she does. And she loves that. She continues to go to ballet, but bar only. And I asked her, I said, why are you just only doing bar? And she goes, because I'm afraid of hurting my back in center floor. And I said, is there anything in particular in center floor you're afraid of? And she said, I'm afraid of the leaps and the hops and the jumps. It's like, okay, that's fine. I said, is this something that you would like to be able to do? And she said, well, it doesn't really matter if I want to do it, if I can't do it. And I said, okay. So I'll just, I just kind of rolled with that a little bit. And, I said, what do you want to see change? What else do you want to see change? Well, it'd be nice if my neck wasn't so stiff in the car driving. I said, okay, great. So I said, let's just take a look at some things and see what's going on and see what we can do, what we can kind of uncover here and see what we can make, change. And through all of this, she never really talked about balance issues. Of course, most people don't unless they're really having the whole visual fall down, kind of thing. Anyway, so I just started taking her through some things. We did, kind of a, can you bend over? She moves very well. This is a person who's been dancing and moving her whole life. She was able to bend over. I didn't notice her guarding or being super stiff or avoiding the movement, which was interesting. But when I asked her to squat, that's when I saw it. She was, she squatted about, I think maybe a third of the way down, and kept herself very stiff. And I asked her, I said, how does that feel? And she goes, well, I don't want to throw my back out. Like, okay.
But she never mentioned her low back at all in her story, right?
She just mentioned, her, but she's still like, I don't want to throw my back out. I don't want to mess with this area. And I said, okay, well, let's try this. I said, what else are you feeling here with this? And so she did it a couple of times and she goes, this makes me feel like I have to go to the bathroom. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that may be what's also rolling with the stiffness there. I said, well, let's try this a little bit differently. Bring your feet wide apart, because she was staying pretty narrow with her feet up under her hips to do the squat.
Yep.
And so she was able to go down further without urgency, which was interesting because that made me start thinking that a little bit of neural tension maybe one of the things that's driving the urgency train a little bit there.
With the narrow base of support. Yeah.
And then as she brought her feet apart, the less neural tension she was able, plus it
Correct.
opened up her hips, and it, she felt a little bit more comfortable, confident, wider base of support. There's probably, 7 things that are going well there when she widened her base. So we just went in and started doing, so I left her low back alone at that point. It was like, we'll get into that in a little bit. We may not even have to go there for right now. But I wanted to check balance out, because when people are like holding themselves so stiff trying to move over a narrow base of support, it's like, okay, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So definitely a decreased balance standing on, which side was it? Written down here. Yes, on the right side.
Right.
As you would expect. Sometimes I find it on the other side, though, because they shift off so far.
They do.
That they don't have great balance on the side that's supposedly the sound side.
Yeah.
But she definitely was struggling on the right side. And while she was doing that, then we went to the left side and it was much better. We went back to the right side. She was still struggling. Left side, much better. And she looked at me and she said, "This is why I don't want to be in center floor. I'm afraid I'll fall." I said, fair enough. Fair enough.
Interesting. So she went from her whole neck and her glutes and her, her urinary issues to the being afraid to fall in the middle of the, interesting.
And I had asked her in the storytelling part at the end of her story what she was really, really worried about deep in the deepest part of her heart, what she was really worried about. And she said she was worried about, harming herself again, that the arthritis would never change and she would never be able to do these other things because it would be harmful. That was what she said. But now when we have her in the middle of where it's being exposed, now her deeper fears are coming out.
Right. Very interesting.
Pretty deep-seated fear of falling.
Yeah.
And I said, so how is this different from doing the brisk walk? And she said, well, when you're walking, I've got my friends around me and we're going and both feet are on the ground, a lot. So, but this is kind of like what I'm afraid of in ballet is standing on one leg without the bar.
Right.
Okay. So that was really, I thought, very telling, because the rest of her system stiffened up immediately. And as soon as she was trying to balance on that one leg, you could see that she was starting to hike her shoulders and she was breathing differently and she was like contracting places. She'd go on the left side, not nearly as bad. Go back to the right side. So I thought, well, let's try to do a little graded work back and forth and see if we can't get this right side to settle down. But it wasn't buying it. Her brain was not going there. It was like, nope, we're going to keep the same pattern going. So I said, okay, so let's take a look at a few other things, because I'm thinking here, I know the story she's told about her back, and maybe that story isn't really needing to be told anymore, because she's been through the plasma-rich injection, she's been through the stuff, she's walking 5 miles a day, she's doing bars, she has symptoms, but they're symptoms of stiffness, they're not like pain. She's, I just felt like it wasn't, this balance thing became the real priority for her, and her really wanting to go back to center floor. When
was her sling operation, Susan?
Oh, her sling operation was 3 to 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So in the sling, works well for people with the stress urinary incontinence.
Okay. Got it.
But really doesn't oftentimes, well, it's not, the urgency is something different.
Yep.
Urgency is much more of a sympathetic, centralized wind-up kind of piece. It can go on there in that situation. Could be kind of a bladder issue itself, not being able to hold as much, the capacity of it. There's a lot of different things that can drive it. But we've talked a lot about this on the podcast with several clients, that I think a lot of neural tension can drive it too.
Yes. And
certainly if they're afraid of falling, the threat, the fear can drive the over-recruitment of the pelvic floor. And drive that too. So in the squat was much more threatening to her than a bend over.
Right.
She had more, when she's used to bending over, because she does that at bar all the time. That's a port bras that they do, and dance, at the ballet bar. So bend over was not an issue for her. She's been doing that all along. It was like the sit back squat that really scared her, or standing over onto one leg without something to hold on to.
I know, it's amazing how many patients, I ask them to squat and they're like, oh, I don't really squat. I'm like, You sit in a chair, don't you? I mean, they actually don't know the mechanics of a squat or even standing on one leg, but they walk and they don't. So when they actually have to do something, even though they do it on a daily basis, they just can't replicate the pattern. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so I said, while we're doing this, let's just take a look also, kind of at your neck. And in the meantime, I'm really observing her. And I'm really noticing that her rib cage is high, and stiff, and just really not moving, well. Even with, I was watching the breathing changes go on and seeing the up and down movement of the rib cage happening, and I wanted to put my hands on there right away and see if that changed her balance, but something just kept telling me I needed to check her C-spine as well, too. So I just thought, you know what, let's just do a full neuro exam real quick and be sure there's nothing going on here that really might need some more attention. She is in her, younger 70s. She's very active, but still. So I did check. Her reflexes were brisk throughout, but they were even all the way through. And there weren't any undermassed reflexes, such as banging on her levator scapula. Didn't produce like a jumping of her scapula. She didn't have any of the other stuff. There was no clonus. There was no Babinski. There was no Hoffman's. But I went through and checked all of that stuff. I thought, let's just be real clear, make sure we don't have anything that might look a little bit funky neurologically going on here. And other than the brief reflexes, really good. So I had her, just sit up and we just did some, neck range of motion and looking. And, as everybody can kind of imagine out there, you can understand she had a pretty good decrease of her sagittal plane motion.
Yeah.
Which always tells me that I need to kind of check the cervicothoracic area. But she also, she was not terrible in her rotation, but she would have about 50 degrees both sides. She just seemed slower and a little bit more sluggish trying to turn it to the right. And I'm part of me was wondering, is it because the range isn't there, or is it because the pattern is set up that she just doesn't turn to the right? She immediately turns her body to the right. And part of that is, the looking, like she said, this is what happens when I have to look behind, is I feel like I have to turn my whole body to do it. So anyway, so we laid down, we checked some things. We got her, I was able to check her rotation lane, down, without weight bearing and doing some things. And it was actually pretty even. And she could even remark on that. She goes, it's really funny when you're doing that, it feels like it moves very well. But when I do it, it feels like it's hard. And so I just took my hands off and I said, you do it then. And she could. And then when she would turn to the right, it would be more difficult. So we did a few little exercises there. I got her to use her eyes and started getting, pumping up the prefrontal cortex to see if we could get some better motor control, motor work going, and had her just move her eyes back and forth, right to left, and, not move her head, and just really, really working the eyes around. And then I had her repeat using her eyes, and she could, she was starting to get the hang of it.
Right.
She was also starting to get the hang of the fact that she goes, I think I'm holding myself back. And I said, in what way do you think that, what does that mean to you? And she goes, I think I've been babying myself. And I'm wondering if maybe I'm past the point of where I need to baby myself so much. And I said, well, let's just kind of give this a whirl and see what happens when you sit up, since it feels a little bit different laying down. So we sat back up and she could turn her head better. And she goes, but it still feels kind of funny. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I just can't get it to turn around the way I want to, like it does to the left. I said, okay. So she laid back down. And I just decided that at this point in time, I was going for the common denominator. We've got problems in the hip, or perceived problems in the hip. We have problems in the cervical spine, or perceived problems in the cervical spine. And the middle of the truth is the thorax. And it was in her thorax is stiff, and I'm telling you it was stiff. So I did a little bit of rib springing to make sure that it was okay to treat that thorax. She has had bone scans. She is osteopenic, but she is not osteoporotic. She's, eats a good, healthy diet. Again, this is a healthy person. When you look at her, you don't see fragility. You see health, you
robust.
See, just really good. And, I just said, you know what, let's do a couple of things with some breathing. and let's just get that system to settle down and maybe reset a little bit. And so all I did was I had her just blow the air straight out so that she could get in a nice, deep, even breath. And then we just blow the air out slowly. We did that a few times just to kind of, you could use any kind of breathing mechanism you wanted to use. It just seemed like that was the best one because she would get a little bit nervous with certain movements. So I thought, what if we could get some slow exhales in there and get that rib cage moving a little bit in a way that was going to be, just different for her system and not being held stiff. Let's just see what would happen with that. So we did that a few times, and she said that that was very relaxing. She turned her head to the right. She goes, it seems to be easier. I said, well, let's do another set of those while we're sitting here talking about the different things she does in her life and, what's so important with her about ballet and how much she loves it and what she had done with it in her life and, things like that. And, so she did some more quiet breathing, and then, we got up and we sat up and she could turn beautifully to the right.
So all you did was just do the breath work. You didn't mob the thorax or rib spring.
Didn't mob the thorax, didn't jump on anything. I could have, but I want, I just want this person, I just wanted to see what is the most simplest approach I could use in here. Drive the change here with her. And she said, okay. And I said, so let's try this. Let's see what happens when we stand back up again. So we stood up and I said, and I put my hands out for her to put her hands on top. And I said, let's just stand on one foot again. And she gave me this look like, I don't believe you, and it was like, let's just give it a whirl. Let's just see.
Right.
And she was able to stand on her right leg without holding on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now,
it's amazing what a little breath work does. Right.
Did it come from her turning her head better? Did it come from her using her eyes a little bit? Did it come from the breathing? Did it come from trust? I have absolutely no idea where it came from, but I can tell you that it changed her system dramatically. So the power of breath and voice has a lot to do with what we do.
Yeah, and also with the eye movement too, with those, those mechanoreceptors in the upper, in the cranium, in the upper C-spine, and plus she trusted you, and I think that's a huge thing with patients like this. I mean, I love the common denominator because we see so many patients with, their body charts are covered everywhere, right? And it's amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So anyway, so the conversation continued. I asked her, I said, how would it feel if you told a different story about your hip and your back? And she said, in what way? And I said, well, in any way that you want to tell it that doesn't sound the way that you were sounding before. I didn't want to say negative, but that was what it sounded like to me, but I didn't want to put the judgment on there. And I said, just play around with that and see if you can, because you're that back and that hip and, that stuff has had a big story, but wow, it sure looks like it's doing well, because you can do these things. And I said, and you're walking 5 miles.
Right.
And she goes, well, she said, I think I'm holding my back myself back again, from center floor. And I said, well, let's go back through it again. What scares you the most? She goes, falling, not being able to do the hips, the jumps and the leaps and the stuff. But I also worry about being on the one leg. And I said, okay, so what can you do to make your balance a little bit better? And she said, I can do that breathing thing. And I said, you can give it a whirl. So when would be a great time to do it? She said, well, right before I do bar, because then I can test my balance at bar.
Correct.
And I said, okay, so what would you feel comfortable doing in center floor? And she goes, well, I would feel comfortable trying to do the standing balance, they call it adagio. It's basically the adage part of center floor. And I said, yeah, and then we can work into, the movement across the floor and some of the combinations and things like that as you feel more comfortable. But let's get this part first. If that feels comfortable to you, if you feel like that you can be in class without judgment and have the space to work on this, I'm in. And she said that she could. She said that, the class and the teacher are very generous as far as people exploring what they can and can't do. She said at this stage of the game, it's more about us being there and enjoying it than it is about, being the perfect ballerina. So, so she felt comfortable in doing that. So kind of sent her home with the breathing exercises and So those were going to be her reset exercise, and her trigger exercises were the squat and the standing on her
Standing
right
on one
leg.
leg.
Mm-hmm. And when those were off, she was going to take. She said, "I'm going to take 2 minutes and work on the breathing a little bit." And she called it centering herself. That's what she liked to use. Those were the words she liked to use. And then I'm going to go back and try it again and see if it changes. So that's kind of how she left, feeling pretty good about that. So go ahead if you have questions now, or what your thoughts might be.
Yeah. No, so that's awesome. So on the breathing, she just did basic. So her sort of reset was breathing, any kind of breath work, standing, supine, sitting, whatever position, right?
Yep.
And how long do you recommend her to do, like a 30 seconds?
I told her, I said, do what feels right, what you feel comfortable with, because there's really no, you have to do this for 5 minutes like this and this, it's just like, no, just do a few of them, see how it does, see if there's a change. And if there's not a change, try it again, a couple of sets of it, but she usually could make a pretty good, she made a pretty good change right there and felt really confident. So she practiced it a little bit standing. She sat in a chair and did it. She goes, maybe I could do this when I turn my head and I feel really stiff. It's like, fantastic. So she took it and ran with it, which was just amazing. But what was dramatic was her being able to really, really, really uncover what really scared her and then find a real simple way to help her begin to start to mediate that.
I mean, when you have somebody, because at that point she's not mentioning her SI joint or her glute tendinosis or trochanteric bursitis,
whatever that story was she was telling about.
That was old. Yeah, exactly. And then the operation for the incontinence and the breast cancer and post, that didn't even play into the picture, right? So, I mean, that was just part of her story. And the woman's, looking at that story, and she's in her early 70s, and she's doing all this. She's pretty resilient and robust, right? So she's not going to, I guess, it's not going to be in her brain, her conscious thought process that she's afraid to fall. Because she'd be coming in and say, I have balance issues and I'm afraid to fall. But she didn't, and I think when you started to doing this, I love, and I will tell you, we've talked about this many times, I play with that narrow base of support, wide base of support on everybody, because I think it's so important. I have a run of patients right now who are older, who have a lot of stenosis and, quote unquote, leg pain, and that narrow base of support and wide base of support makes a huge difference to these people, especially when they're going from sit to stand. And I think whatever the age is, that's a great thing just to start off with. Just look at,
and then narrow it up as they go. Yep,
totally. And do forward bending, do squat, do whatever. And I think just with that little piece of information, I think you can glean a lot. So in terms of the ram's horn, that was just a neck pain, correct? Excuse me, she didn't have a headache or anything like that, right?
Right. She would just say that she would get that every once in a while, mainly if she would wake up at night with her head in a funny position. But, she was more interested in the reason that she wasn't turning her neck well. And she just really wanted to, the story she heard and believed and adopted was that she couldn't change because it was arthritic and it was just old age.
Right.
And the story that she ended up, so that's why I think it's really important to hear their whole story. Because had I not sat there and really listened to this story all the way through, it wouldn't have been very easy to kind of gently get her to confront her hip and back issues with the fact that she's walking 5 miles a day without any issue at all.
I know.
No problem when she walks. No problem at bar and ballet. And we talked about the different positions and movements from that. And it's like, so there was some, and had she not gone through that whole story, and I had not, because, my old thing was to kind of interrupt the story a little bit and replace her narrative with one I felt was a better narrative. And you can't do that. Learned through the years. And I've really learned recently, you can bring the narrative together with their narrative, but you can't force a new narrative on them. And she needed to, and sometimes telling that whole story and putting it together can be so empowering for people, because then they really begin to start connecting some of the own dots in their own head. Like, hey, I am a resilient, healthy look at everything I've done and what I'm doing now and what I wasn't doing before.
Right.
You know, because all the way back to where she broke her patella, she wasn't walking. And now she's walking 5 miles a day with her friends again, you know.
I mean, in her early 70s, for God's sakes,
Yes,
you know.
yeah, she's doing exactly what we all want to be doing in our early 70s, is moving and laughing and having a life, and you know, being, you know, doing all the things we want to still keep doing. So
I know. And I think people's story, you can change the person's story. I mean, I think you don't get this opportunity again, I think, because the follow-up visits are different than the first visit, in my opinion. You just let the person unburden themselves, tell the story. And I always tell people, well, your story can change. You can change your story, rewrite your story, ask a different question, right? It's not always about, oh, I have arthritis. Okay, well, everybody does, you know. And I think you need to change the person's story, or they need to, and you need to sort of ask the right questions and help them do that. And with her, you could have easily gone down the whole, you know, let me look at the SI joint, let me look at the joint mobility of the C-spine, easily, because those were her two main complaints.
Right.
And I think that when you delve into people's, you know, we use the word function so often, but when you delve into what really matters to people, because what really matters to people is why they're there. So ultimately, it's not like my SI joint hurts or my neck hurts. What matters to you? What do you think the problem is? Are you doing something? Do you want to do something better in your life? That's a great question I ask now. I want to be able to swim better. And that never came up in the story. So they're never going to get that relief, or they're never going to feel like they've gotten better, quote unquote, until what matters to them is better, right? And you're not going to know that unless you let them listen or ask them questions, because sometimes as therapists we tend to go and do because we want to fix people. I get it. You know, it's part of our, you know, where we want them to, you know, fix themselves or whatever. I mean, it's not a great word, but we want to help them. But I think sometimes, you know, taking a step back and just looking at the whole person and really what matters to them. What matters to them is what matters to you at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right? So that's that. That was great. I don't have any questions.
So the way she progressed, just for everybody to kind of know, is that she did start working in Centroflora a bit. Then she was ready to start doing a couple of combinations. So what she did was she actually brought the combination. Well, she knows ballet combinations. We just used a bar. And we did them with the bar in front of her so she could lightly hold the bar as she needed to. As she did, you know, some easy, you know, crossovers and bounces and, you know, pas de chats and jetés for those of you who know ballet language. You know, for those of you who don't, just, you know, some side stepping and little small hopping and, you know, leg crossings and leg uncrossings and things like that. The thing that became very challenging was the pirouettes. And, you know, so she's got her marching orders. She goes and she does, and she's working on actually doing half pirouettes in a corner so that she can put her hands out to hold.
Wow.
And just really kind of, you know, get her balance. So I've started her on just some standing, turning around, spinning, you know, twisting around, doing different things so that she can get that rotational piece back. And it's not that she can't recover that. She just hasn't used it in such a very long time. Yep. And that makes a lot of sense to me, that when you start turning your head, when you haven't turned it fast, you know, that it's going to just take a little while for that to ramp up. So, you know, it's one of these things. She pops in about every 2 months and gives me the update on where she is and what's going on. And we tweak a few things and add some more challenges, and off she goes. You know, she does it all on her own. And every once in a while, she likes to talk about the old story, and that's okay because it's hard to let go of that narrative. But it's her narrative, and I'm not going to squash it. I'm just going to gently kind of continue to help her confront it. You know, she's one of those. She's one of those that's been kind of an avoider and not really more of a confronter, and she needs to. So we just confront the not idiosyncrasies, but the discrepancies.
Yeah.
You know, but remember, what about this? You're able to do this. Why is that different than this? You know, and so not really changing her narrative, but giving her the opportunity to reframe it herself.
Like reframing it. Love that word. Yep. That's
so great. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope your 4th of July and into the summer is great.
Yes, yes, yes. And for anybody who's not subscribed to our podcast, we would love you to do so. And our website, we send out, an email, a newsletter every couple of weeks. And we have some opt-ins on the website. So if you go to toughtotreat.com and you opt into our list, you'll get a Clinical Pearls PDF that I wrote about just clinical pearls and sort of case studies of patients of mine, and a great PDF that Susan wrote on sleep tips for patients in persistent pain. So it's really awesome. So if you go to toughtotreat.com, it'll be on the bottom. You can just put in your email, and we won't spam you at all. We don't bother people every day with emails. So it's just those are two great PDFs and two great resources for you guys to have. And thanks again for listening.
Okay, bye.
Bye.